Hi, my name's Felix and I'm a graphic designer from Germany, and this is my video series that is going to explore how graphic designers can use Blender in their workflows. I started working with Blender in the beginning of this year, and I've already found it very helpful in many different ways. For anyone starting new with Blender, I would highly recommend having a look at the Blender Guru Donut tutorial, because that is a very, very good introduction into the general Blender workflows and explains a lot of basics that you will need and that will come in very helpful throughout your Blender journey. So without any further ado, this is going to be the first video of a series of multiple videos. If you're interested in learning whenever I publish a new one, consider subscribing. And besides from that, have fun with this first video where we're going to be creating a little business card mock-up. All right, so welcome to the first video. Before we get into actually creating our first scene, we have to do a little bit of setup before, and this is why we're gonna head straight into the preferences. And first of all, we're gonna emulate the numpad, so we tick this box here. That's gonna make it a little easier navigating the scene. And the second thing that I want you to do is go to this add-ons tab and then look for the import images as planes plugin and activate that as well by clicking this little tick box over here. And now we're pretty much all set, and I'm gonna start explaining a little bit about the workspace, and then we're gonna get into designing our first scene. Okay, so in Blender you have this main viewport. This is what welcomes you when you first open the software. You have the default cube in here, and pretty much everything is arranged around that. A lot of things you might recognize in terms of their positioning from Creative Cloud software. So we have a selection of tools over here, and a selection of preferences over here. On top, this is something like the layers of the document. So you have all the objects that are in the scene. Currently we have a camera, a cube, which is this gray one over here, and a light, that little fella there. And then we have preferences down here. We're gonna get into some of these later on, but this is just so you get a feel for the basic setup. The first thing that you might want to know is how to navigate this space, this viewport. And for that, I would advise you all getting a mouse with a wheel that you can also use as a middle button, because that makes navigating the scene much more easy, because you can just press the wheel to then rotate around your center here. Or you can press Shift and the middle mouse button to move the focus point of the camera around, as well as use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out of the scene. So this is basically how you move within the scene. And the alternative, if you don't have a mouse ready yet, you can use this little tool up here. This can also be used to turn the camera within the viewport. So you have to just click into this little section up here and move your cursor around to rotate the camera. You can click and move the mouse to zoom in here, and you can also pan the camera around using this little button here. That camera icon shows you the current camera. If you click it, you get this frame. This is what your virtual camera is seeing at the moment. But since we enabled the emulated numpad, you can also toggle this view with the number 0 on your keyboard. So that's going to be very important later on. And that's pretty much how you navigate through the scene. Okay, so next up we're gonna take a look at how to manipulate objects within our viewport. We have this default cube here, and if we click it, then you see this orange border highlighting it, so you have that one selected, and you can either use shortcuts on your keyboard to manipulate it, which are G, grab for moving it around, S, scale to scale it, or R for rotate to rotate it. As you see, if you move it around, it sticks to the plane that your camera is in, so you cannot push it back, but you might want to do that. And to do that, you also need the middle mouse button, because if you click and hold the middle mouse button, you can lock it to these different axes and then push it along those. If you let go of the middle mouse button, then it just stays locked to that axis that you last selected, and then you can move your object around. An alternative to manipulating the object in space are these tools over here. You have the move tool, which gives you these little arrows where you can also move along the axes. You have the rotation tool that works accordingly, and the size tool as well. And you also have this multi-tool where you can do all of these operations inside of one tool. So now we want to get into building our first scene. We're going to do a quick little business card mock-up as a first starting scene. And for that, we're going to delete our default cube. We do that by selecting it and pressing X on the keyboard, and then just hitting delete with your mouse, and it's gone. And now we're going to use this plugin that we activated before. And we're going to go to File, Import, Images as Planes. And then we're going to select our business card. I have prepared exports in PNG format for that. So I'm going to select this front one here and just click on the Import Images as Planes. And now you see a new object was created in our scene, but we do not see anything on it, so you cannot really check if the import really worked. And to do that, we're going to switch our viewport rendering mode. There are these selections up here, which give you different options. You can do a wireframe, which is just going to show you the outline of the object, the solid view, which we were using up until now. And then you have a material preview and a viewport shading that gives you a render preview. And this is the one we're going to be using because it makes it much easier to set up lightings and camera later on. So we're just going to click that and wait a moment. All right, and there we go. Now we have our business card in the viewport in Blender. And because we want to show both front and back, we're just going to move this one to the side, leave everything as it is, so we're not resizing or rotating it yet, and just going to do the second import, which is again File, Import, Images, Planes. Then we're going to select our back image here. Again, click Import and give it a second, and now we have both sides of the business cards in our viewport. So now you can already press the 0 on your keyboard to get a little preview of the whole arrangement. And this is where experience in photography will come in handy, because what we're doing now is pretty much just building a digital photo set and setting up everything and then just taking a digital picture of our scene. So first of all, we're gonna arrange the cards using the tools that we have in our toolbar. So I'm gonna rotate this one a little bit, give it an interesting orientation, move it off to the side, and we're gonna flip this one as well. And as you see here, I'm just using this tool, so there's no no need to be familiar with all of the shortcuts yet. And once we have a composition that we like, we will set our camera to that composition. There's a very helpful shortcut for that as well. We're just gonna move the camera as we want to have everything framed, and then we're gonna press Alt Command and 0, and then there you see the frame was created and just copied our viewport setting. I'm gonna move out of the camera. You see the camera has moved now, and what we now need to add is some kind of a background, and we're gonna just add a plane as a background. We do that by hitting Shift A on our keyboard and then just selecting plane. And if you click on that, it will create a new plane. Okay, now our plane was being created, and now we see it is intersecting one of our cards. So we're just gonna push it down, and since it doesn't really work as a background yet, we're just gonna hit S and scale it to an appropriate size. So if we want to fine-tune our camera, we can just hit N, open this little toolbar here, and check this little camera to view box here. And what that basically does is that it gives you the possibility to move your camera around like you have been moving your viewport camera around. So you can again use the wheel to zoom in and the middle mouse button to just rotate the camera. And we're just going to look for an interesting image here. You can adjust some things, and that gives you the opportunity to do your first render really quickly. So we're going to do a quick test rendering now. We're going to do that by selecting render and then just render image. We'll have to wait for that. All right, and there you have it, your first rendering. If you want to save this image, you can just click on image over here and press save as. We're for now just going to close this window again and do some more fine-tuning in the next step. Okay, so what you have to remember is that you have this camera to view activated. So if you're not leaving the camera by pressing 0 or this camera button here, you're always changing the image that you're going to be rendering. So be mindful of that. You can just untick this box, or you just have to switch out of the camera. If you haven't have this box ticked, then moving the camera once you're in there just takes you out of the preview camera. Okay, so we're now going to do a little bit of fine-tuning for our scene. The first thing that we're going to do is give this background plane a material, and to do that we're just going to select it. So we have this orange border around it, and then go into this material tab down here and just click on new to create a new material for it. And now we have the option to tune the material to our liking. The most obvious thing that you might want to do is change the color. We do that by going into this base color field. So we just click the base color and we get a color picker where we can just go ahead and change the background color to our liking. So that is the first thing that you might want to adjust. The next thing that is good to know is this roughness parameter down here, because that changes the way that your material is going to interact with the lighting. The rougher the material, the less of a reflection of the light you're getting. So if I click and drag this slider up, and you see the reflection of our light disappears, and if I move it down, it gets much more clear. and if you have a really, really low roughness, then you actually do get reflection in your material, as you can see here. So usually for the backgrounds, it's a good idea to make them fairly rough. We're just gonna put in 0.9 for our background here. And the same is true for your imported images as well. So they also have a material attached to them. So if we want to click on one of these, you see they also do have this roughness parameter. And if you move that around, the reaction to the light does change. So you can set that according to the material that you want to simulate. If you have a very shiny paper, you can turn it down and get this reflection. And if you have a matte paper, then you can move this up to a value like I'm doing it here. So we're going to do 0.85 for that as well, which is going to make it more matte. So now we have done a little bit of tuning in regards to our materials. And now we're going to look at the lighting again. So we do have our standard light in the scene that I can select in our collection here, as well as by zooming out and figuring out where it is placed right now. And like the objects in the scene, you can also move that one around. And because we have activated the preview, we can see what is happening right when we start moving the light around. One thing that you need to know about the lights is that you can only move the position within the viewport, which is going to be changing the shadows, of course. But if you want to change other parameters, you have to go into this little lighting tab here that is already active. And in here, you can select different kinds of lights. So you have the point light, a sun, a spotlight, where you can see it's creating this spot. And you have the area light, which is like a softbox, if you're familiar with that concept from photography. So we're still going to be using the point light, but we're going to increase the radius here to make the shadows a little softer. And then we're going to hit the 0 again to preview our scene. And now I want to be moving the camera a little bit. All right, and before we will be doing our final render, we're going to look into the render settings, because it's also very important to know how to adjust those. And this first one here that looks like the back of a DSLR camera is the settings tab for the renderer, where you can activate different options. We're just going to leave it like it is for now. And this little printer icon down below is where you can set the resolution and all the export parameters. Just to show you how this works, I'm going to change our resolution, which is currently 1080p. And we're just going to put in 1080 by 1080. And as you see, the aspect ratio of our little border changes, as well as our actual image. So we have to reset the camera. There are two ways to do that. You can either move the camera closer to the subject by using the camera to view that is currently activated, but you can also change the setting of the camera. We do that by clicking on the camera here, and then you have this little camera properties tab down here, and there you can adjust the focal length. We're just going to put in 85 millimeters. That's a little too much, so I'm going to try 70. That looks better. And now we're going to hit render image again. Okay, there we have our second preview. Looking at it now, I think the cards themselves are a little too dark. It's really hard to separate them both, and this is where we're going to adjust the lighting once again. So I'm going to close this render window, go into our light settings, and just increase the power of our lamp here. So we're gonna go with 1500 watts. Now we get better separation down here. I still want to increase it a little more. That's better. And now you have more definition in this edge on the card. And now we're just gonna do another rendering. All right, and there we have it, our first rendering. We can now save this image by clicking on image and save or save as, select a folder where we want to place it. And that is pretty much how you render your first little mock-up scene. So for now, this is all we have time for. Thank you for watching this video. If you're interested in getting to know when the next videos will be released, consider subscribing. If you have any comments, just use the comment section for that. If you have suggestions what you would like me to create for you, then just also let me know. And yeah, have fun recreating this little mock-up scene. Thank you.